The Empire sent 1,000,000 soldiers into the labyrinth, hoping the slaughter would forge a few awakened survivors. Instead, they got absolute silence. The primordial demons are holding the floors, Ramirez has cut off their intelligence, and Demon Lord Rimuru is no longer a speck on the board. He is the threat the Empire can no longer ignore. And back in the capital, Yuuki's coup is about to be purged. AI Anime and Manga presents. If you want more full light novel style episodes like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. It helps the channel reach the right anime fans, and Patreon members get early access while helping keep the AI, render, and editing bills moving. Now, let's return to the Empire, where the rules of the game have just changed. It was a record of battles, a heavenly game continuing for many years. A game between the Demon Lords and the heroes, with supremacy over the planet hanging in the balance. But to Velgrynd the Flame Dragon, that game had no meaning, she had no interest in it, and she did not care who won in the end. Why go through all this trouble, she reasoned, when the two sides could just fight it out directly and determine the better player? Of course, Guy and Ludora had tried that many times without ever settling on a victor. That was where this game came from. Its only rule was simple: no direct confrontation. There was no point complaining about it, but that did not mean Velgrynd enjoyed it. If she was honest, she thought the whole game put her side at a disadvantage. The only pawn Guy had who could defeat Ludora was Velgrynd. As long as they could deal with her, Ludora would be the winner. But the same was true of Guy. Only Velgrynd had a chance of beating that Demon Lord. The problem was that Velgrynd herself thought it would be a difficult slog at best. Velgrynd had a concrete chance of winning against Ludora, while Velgrynd did not feel fully prepared against Guy. In her mind, that made Ludora's side the underdogs from the start. What a pain, Velgrynd thought, and she meant it. She had never been fond of scheming behind the scenes. Spending hundreds of years meticulously preparing for everything was simply outside her wheelhouse. So she left all of that to Ludora and followed his orders. As long as Ludora wanted to win, she would spare no effort to help. If he wanted her to fight. She would figure out what to do against Velgrynd, and she would make sure they won. Guy was undoubtedly the strongest of Demon Lords, and Velgrynd's sister, Velgrynd the Ice Dragon, was the worst possible match for her in battle. They were natural enemies. A head-to-head fight against Velgrynd would be difficult to win. If two true dragons fought each other, they would take each other down at best. At worst, it would mean reincarnation and going back to the drawing board for Velgrynd. Even that might have been too optimistic. Velgrynd's element was heat, Velgrynd's was ice. They were polar opposites, one symbolizing acceleration and the other shuddering to a stop. If they fought for keeps, the outcome would be disastrous. Neither would survive. Both would fall. In other words, there was a good chance Velgrynd and Velgrynd would disappear entirely. The sisters would be reincarnated, and they would probably inherit their memories, but their current selves would fade to nothing. They would still be different people. That scared Velgrynd. She did not mind fading away herself, but she did not want to lose her love for Ludora. Clinging to something as trivial as love made her laugh at herself. Complete victory, as Velgrynd defined it, meant that both she and Ludora were safe. That was why they needed insurance. But that insurance was proving difficult to handle. Her thought turned toward Veldora with open irritation. What a load of trouble he is. Apparently, he lucked out enough to break the seal, so why has he not even come to see me? Velgrynd was peeved at the insurance that was Veldora. It never occurred to her that he might be afraid of her. The Veldora she knew would have begun a worldwide rampage long ago. But for reasons only he knew, he was currently buddying up with a newly christened Demon Lord. When Velgrynd heard that he had even participated in the most recent Purges council, she suspected that years of being imprisoned in a seal had driven him insane. Still, it was hard to believe that Veldora, with his love of large-scale mayhem, would sit silently in front of a 1,000,000-strong army. Velgrynd was sure he would step out and make himself known. Instead, she was shocked. Veldora was still holed up in the depths of the labyrinth, refusing to show himself. That was completely unexpected. He has always done what he pleases, she thought. But why has he not shown up this time? Veldora was extremely protective of his territory, just as he had been during the last Imperial invasion. Anyone who infiltrated the forest of Jura, Velgrynd assumed, would unavoidably have an encounter with its guardian dragon. That, in turn, was precisely what Ludora wanted. To him, a strong army was nowhere near as important as a few individuals who had transcended their limits. The previous invasion had also produced survivors who successfully evolved. Only those who held on to hope under extreme circumstances through hatred, fear, or despair could break through the shell of humanity and reach the next level. Even if an army of 1 million was literally annihilated, it would all be worth it if a few people awakened. Those were Ludora's thoughts, and Velgrynd saw the wisdom in them. That was why Ludora never gave the IIB's more detailed reports to his army. He wanted to mislead the commanders so they would be more motivated than ever to fight. To Velgrynd, the sheer confidence of every corps commander was almost farcical. There was very little chance, none at all in fact, that this mission would work out. An army enhanced through science or whatever had no hope of beating Veldora. Once again, there would be unthinkable amounts of death. But that was what gave her hope. Velgrynd amused herself by wondering how many survivors would awaken this time. The more people who received Ludora's powers, the better his chance of victory. She was looking forward to it. Yet despite that anticipation, the results of the invasion left her speechless. Velgrynd asked, "They were all wiped out?" Ludora gave a dry little laugh. "I was surprised myself. But you as well, eh? It has been quite a while since I have seen that look on your face." Velgrynd did not let him make light of it. "Do not joke about this. Neither of us expected a defeat so huge that absolutely no one was left alive. That means your aim to get even one single awakened survivor has failed." The idea was to give as much experience to their soldiers and officers as possible, raising them up to at least Imperial Knight material. Those were the people who would become awakened in operations like this. That was the hidden objective of it all. Instead, they had 0 survivors. To say the attack on Veldora had turned out better than this would have been underselling the problem. Only by interacting with the greatest strength in the world, experiencing the despair that wrought, and living to tell the tale could a human being enhance their chances of evolution. That was why this gigantic army had been organized for the invasion. If nobody survived, then it had all been for nothing. As if that was not enough, all the Imperial Knights sent on undercover missions into the forest had gone silent as well. They had consumed a large number of valuable game pieces in this operation. A major loss with no gain in return. Ludora said with that same maddening calm. "Well, that is how it goes." Velgrynd was less than happy with his nonchalant reply, but one look at his eyes made her anger disappear. The sheer frustration in his gaze was too intense to bear for long. She could tell he felt the same way she did. So she switched gears. Losing an entire army did not matter to her. If a few awakened had come out of it, they would have had no complaints. Even failures like this one were no great problem by themselves. But they could not afford to ignore the adversary that had engineered this loss. If 1 million Imperial troops were literally wiped off the map, the opponent's strength was no laughing matter. They needed to be absolutely sure who had done it. Regaining her composure, Velgrynd asked, "Do you think he did it again?" She had seen no sign of violence from Veldora at all, but they had reports that the Storm Dragon destroyed an army of 20,000 over in Farmus. The IIB did not have operatives in that rural nation, so they could not learn more about the incident. This time was different. They should have had a full grasp of the situation, and the files would soon be coming to Velgrynd, addressed to the Marshal. If Ludora had found out about this defeat before her, it was only because he had the power to do so. She was eager to get the viewpoint of the man she trusted so immensely. If she had to guess, her fun-loving brother would never miss the chance to rampage. If 1 million soldiers attacked his turf, Veldora would have to come out. Then they could gauge how much power he had, and whether he truly could control his aura now, to the point that they could not even spot his presence. To Velgrynd, her brother's growth was a joy to behold. He might be a fool, but she still cherished him. He was also a handful. She had to recruit him to their side at all costs. Before he joined Guy instead, Velgrynd was always looking for ways to make that happen. Learning about his growth was vital. But Ludora answered, he did not. Amazingly enough, not even I am able to gain much detail. Ludora told Velgrynd everything he knew, The major failures of the opening battles, the legions that entered the labyrinth and still had not been heard from, the awe-inspiring magic that wiped out the rest of the forces, Caligula's awakening in the final battle, and the exact way the armored core found itself defeated, as if he had watched it in person. Velgrynd could hardly believe it. "You are kidding me," Ludora said. "It is true. All 4 of the remaining primals are aiding the Demon Lord Rimuru's camp. If they decide to throw everything they have into battle, your brother hardly needs to lift a finger." "Then the balance of this game has utterly collapsed," Velgrynd said. "I wonder if Guy is just as upset about this, or if this is exactly what he wanted." "Good question," Ludora replied. "If this is what Guy has been after all along, it is time for us to admit we are at a huge disadvantage in this battle." Ludora chuckled. They had spent years upon years building their strength, preparing for the best possible moment to strike, steadily and without rushing. Then, in the blink of an eye, someone else had acquired an unimaginable amount of strength. This was Rimuru, the newbie, the smallest little speck they had never even noticed before. It was time to admit as much. Velgrynd sensed it too, and a burning desire to fight this threat began kindling inside her. Velgrynd asked, "But you have not been able to fully grasp the scene inside the labyrinth?" Ludora gave a short, annoyed laugh. "You have it. Annoyingly enough, not even my power can break Ramirez's own." It made sense to Velgrynd. The Labyrinth Master had been all but impenetrable. She was not exactly an impartial referee for this game, but she had never been someone involved with the pieces on the board. Until now. Now Ramirez was completely favoring the Demon Lord Rimuru. Regardless of how the game with Guy turned out, she was planning to set up shop in the Forest of Jura that the Empire had just attempted to invade. Ramirez did not have any great power herself. Velgrynd had considered her negligible, someone who would never affect the game. But her Misecraft skill was likely capable of shutting out all information between the labyrinth and the outside world. As Velgrynd realized that, she rolled her eyes. It was going to be cumbersome. "But did Ramirez not lose her power as the arbitrator?" Velgrynd asked. "She certainly did," Ludora answered. "I neglected her since she was no threat to us. But her labyrinth may just be the greatest hiding place in the world. We could see into it through Bernie's and Jiwoo's eyes until now." Velgrynd finished the thought for him. "But now you cannot, out of nowhere?" Ludora nodded. "I am sure this was a ploy to catch me off guard." "I suppose it was," Velgrynd said. "This is certainly more troubling than I thought." Velgrynd understood just how serious this was. Basically, they had no idea what had happened inside the labyrinth. Normally, she would default to assuming Veldora had done something, but now she felt there was more to it than that. Ludora said, "The main issue here is that Rimuru has apparently stuck some powerful compatriots of his inside the labyrinth as well. Your brother is the highest ranking among them, but who can say how much this newcomer has tamed him?" Velgrynd rejected the idea. "The Veldora I know would never meekly take orders from someone else. And while you may be another matter, I doubt Rimuru could bind him down with a skill of any sort." Their reports indicated that Veldora was working in tandem with the Demon Lord Rimuru, but Veldora was never the type to do other people's bidding. He openly defied Velgrynd and Velzard all the time. Velgrynd felt safe assuming that no one could subdue him by force. So had the Demon Lord prepared something that could actually make Veldora his lapdog? Velgrynd tried to imagine what it could be, but gave up. If such a thing existed, she thought, they would not have gone through all this trouble over the years. Perhaps she could ask the Demon Lord Rimuru himself. "Best to hear it from the Demon Lord, I would say," Velgrynd murmured. Ludora laughed out loud. "Haha, I am glad you have come to the same conclusion I did." The Demon Lord Rimuru could no longer be ignored by either of them. Since he had already tamed primals, it was safe to assume Veldora might be similarly at his beck and call. If that were the case, they needed to figure out how to wrest Veldora from Guy's camp first. Ludora said, "If we are going to make a move, now might be a good time. Guy has no doubt let his guard down now that our first advance failed. A Demon Lord as patient as he is would expect us to retreat and wait for our next chance." Velgrynd agreed. "Good point. He has always been careful with his movements, never taking major risks. Perhaps a quicker move is better advised here. We have little time to lose anyway." Velgrynd was delighted. Finally, Ludora was looking to settle matters with Guy. They would no longer bide their time, and she could use this opportunity to seize control of Veldora in short order. Perhaps their momentum could also crush the newcomer Demon Lord Rimuru and carry them toward an all-or-nothing confrontation with Guy. Velgryn's confidence rose. "Allow me to handle this then. I will go out there, kick some ass, and then you can come over and lay the groundwork. I believe in you, Ludora." "Of course," Ludora replied. "And if we can just get our hands on Veldora, the rest will take care of itself. Tatsuya has come up with a rather interesting plan as well, so I think we can make up for this debacle very shortly. Even the nightmarish primals would be no match for a true dragon like Velgrynd in a head-on matchup. If they defied her, she would smash them to the ground so they would not cause needless trouble later. There may be others in Rimuru's camp who could cause problems for us," Velgrynd thought. "But if I am out on the battlefield, it is all moot anyway." Now Velgrynd was exuding confidence. She asked, "Well, how about we make those fools shed some blood to warm up?" Their attention turned toward a group arrogant enough to defy Ludora, a band they had allowed to go free until now. That would end today. Anyone plotting a coup against the Emperor would see no possible outcome except death. That was why Velgrynd made the suggestion, but Ludora only grinned and shook his head. "I would rather keep them alive than kill them," Ludora said. Velgrynd was surprised. "Oh? That is uncommon to hear from you. I thought you would be kind enough to grant them a painless death." Ludora continued, "No. I need them for Tatsuya's proposal. He was hoping to set off another big battle over here in order to attract Guy's attention," Velgrynd said. "Rather like Kondo, is it not? I would never even think about using Imperial traitors against our enemies." Ludora answered, "Do you dislike it? I would not call Tatsuya's plan very humane, certainly, but I do believe it makes logical sense." Velgrynd gave a vague nod. No matter how outlandishly cruel the plan was, it did not matter to her. She simply wanted to give the traitors divine punishment with her own two hands. Here was a true dragon who loved Ludora, but she certainly did not love humans. She had no vendetta against them and no desire to kill them down to the last person, but anyone foolish enough to betray the Emperor needed to die. "All right," she decided. "If it helps Ludora, I will let them go for now." With that, Velgrynd moved on. "So what is Kondo's plan exactly?" she asked. Ludora answered, "I will talk about that in a moment, but first we need to review our current strategy." Velgrynd immediately knew what he meant. "Ah, right. With things how they are, a two-pronged strategy is kind of pointless," Ludora agreed. "Exactly. Let us withdraw for now. We can always attack Luminous later." Velgrynd said yes. "Once you and I persuade Veldora to join us, everything else is bound to come together too. But I will call Gradim and his forces back as well, just in case we run into any resistance." Ludora asked, "Would you mind?" Velgrynd said, "Not at all. For now, let us keep the rebels subjugated and take down Dwargen while we are at it. That should be enough to fully distract Guy." With that, their scheming was over. Velgrynd stood up. It had been millennia since she had waded into the game, and now the table was set for a tragedy that would later be called the Red Purge. In the Imperial Capital, the darkness ran deep and black. Advances in science had given the city natural gas-powered streetlights to illuminate its streets, but there were still many back alleys hidden from the public eye. The city was still developing, and it would be quite a while before all the darkness inside it was eradicated. Misha was quietly walking through the dark where she had been born and raised. Here, it gave her mind comfort instead of fear. That was simply how she was. In the days since she finished her report to Yuuki, Misha had stayed hidden in the shadows, busily preparing for the upcoming coup. The Imperial Army was out on an invasion, and it would be dangerous for an officer like Misha to be seen in public. Desertion was punishable by death, and it also described what she was doing pretty well at the moment. But she strode on with confidence, not a hint of fear on her face. It made clear just how confident she was in her knowledge of the city's darkness. Despite her preference for staying behind the scenes, Misha was an excellent fighter. She was not as good as Vega or Damrada, But she was certainly a talented boss all the same. She was an expert at intelligence gathering and prided herself on outclassing the agents of Dwargen and Bloomond. That was why she felt sure she could hide from the Imperial Intelligence Bureau. Up to now, she had survived in the capital well enough. She was heading for her usual destination. But tonight, that seemed to be a mistake. She had not been careless at all. Even so, a man appeared to block her way. His name was Tatsuya Kondo, the figure stalking the halls of information in the IIB. Damrada had not confirmed it with her, but he was also likely the commander of the Imperial Guardians. At the very least, there was no way Misha could ever hope to beat him one-on-one. Kondo's cold voice resonated through the alley. "Where are you going this time of night?" Misha smiled even as she chided herself internally. "Oh, it is you, Lieutenant Kondo. Are you working late tonight?" Despite her misgivings, she acted perfectly serene. But for Misha, the situation could not have been much worse. She thought, "I cannot believe he sniffed me out in this remote nook of such a vast city. What a monster. There is no way I could beat him, and my escorts will not even buy any time for me." Kondo had appeared without warning, but he seemed to be alone. That did not give Misha much optimism. She searched for a way, any way, to get out. Kondo asked, "You are Misha, are you not? Staff officer for Commander Caligulio? Why are you back in the capital during a wartime operation?" His tone was dead serious. Misha answered with a performance of fear. "It was so scary, Lieutenant Kondo. I was actually asked by Lord Caligulio to go on a secret mission back to the capital." She had to deceive him somehow. At the same time, she searched her surroundings for other people, keeping her guard up. There was no one else in the cramped alleyway, which was fine, but her bodyguards had apparently disappeared. Had they already taken care of them? How outclassed were they? Misha had not even noticed a fight. In an instant, she gauged the situation. They did not know each other personally, but there was no way Kondo was unaware of Misha. She did not know how he saw her, but it did not seem like words alone would get her through this. Her guards had been dispatched without a moment's hesitation. Deception, she assumed, was out of the question. So she decided to ask Damrada for help at the rendezvous point ahead. Then an unpleasant thought entered her mind. How did they find out where I was? Sir Yuuki decided to trust Damrada, but can I do the same? Damrada had arranged this meeting place. They were supposed to work out the details of the top-secret conference they would have with the Demon Lord Rimuru tomorrow. Misha's thoughts tightened. Not good at all. There is a chance Damrada double-crossed us, as much as I hate to think it. Sir Yuuki trusts him, and besides, I owe Damrada as well. Misha and Damrada had known each other for over 20 years. They were both leaders of Cerberus, and she felt she knew more about him than even Yuuki did. That was why this was so confusing. She knew Damrada to be cold-hearted and rational. Based on what he had told her, he had no apparent reason to stab Misha in the back. She not only wanted to believe that, after listening to Yuuki explain matters, she was convinced of it. Now was not the time for hesitation. She had to believe in her friends until the end. With her mind made up, Misha looked at Kondo. "My gratitude goes out to the great Emperor Ludora for the good fortune of meeting you here," she said. Kondo gave her a flat, interested sound. "Oh?" Misha pressed the act further. "It was you, Lieutenant, was it not? The one who took out my pursuers? I knew I would not be able to take on that many opponents by myself." "Ah," Kondo said. "Proceeding with that script, then." Misha widened the performance. "Oh, are you suspicious of me? Even after I have been desperately trying to get back from that hellhole to bring you my information at all costs?" Misha boldly continued the performance, approaching Kondo and sidling up to his chest. This was Misha the lover's specialty, using her feminine charms to ensnare unwitting men. It was powered by a combination of curse perfume and the illusory magic charm. It worked on the target's mind, stimulating base instincts while inhibiting thought processes in order to make them fall in love with her. Their dependence on Misha would grow stronger the closer she was to them, physically and emotionally. Once she had it all in place, she would have as much control over the target as she wanted. She was using this on Caligulio as well. By her estimation, after a few more embraces, he would be hers for the taking. Not just Caligulio either. A litany of men had fallen for her wiles. As far as she knew, it had never failed before. It was the most powerful card she had to play, because even if she had no chance in battle, she was sure any opponent would succumb to lust for her. So Misha wrapped her hands around Kondo's back and pressed herself close against him. Then she gauged his reaction. She could sense him slackening a little, and she giggled to herself. Good, she thought. He pretends to be this stuck-up bastard, but even Kondo is still a man. This was going better than she anticipated. Maybe it would work out after all. Misha whispered close to his ear. Why do we not go someplace else? A room where we can relax, maybe. Kondo's right hand moved a little. Very well, she heard him whisper back. It was going well. Her best bet was to meet Damrada at the rendezvous point. Even if that failed, she could have Kondo sleep with her, and then he would become her captive. That was the last thought Misha ever had. With a dry bang, she collapsed to the ground, the left side of her head bleeding profusely across the street. Somewhere along the way, Kondo had produced a Nambu semi-automatic handgun. Smoke rising from the muzzle made it clear that this was the weapon that had shot Misha in the temple. He put it away, expression frozen, as if nothing improper had happened. Kondo's unique skilled decipherer could read the thoughts of anyone he came into contact with. It had already collected all relevant information: Misha's objective, Yuuki's plans, and the fate of the Imperial troops staging the invasion. It took him less than a second to read all of it. But despite the devastating truths revealed to him, Kondo's face remained frozen. Looking almost bored, he spoke into the darkness. A coup, Kondo said. What a deranged idea. And yet you claim you are not betraying His Majesty? From the darkness where nobody should have been, a lone man emerged. Instead of answering Kondo's question, he walked up to Misha's crumpled body. It was Damrada. Damrada said, Kondo, you did not have to kill her, did you? With the right education, she could have been of great help to His Majesty. No, there was no chance of that, Kondo answered. Apply a ranking to her skills and she would be lucky to reach 37 or so. She might have had a chance if she could reach the teens at least, but no woman of her caliber could ever serve His Majesty. Besides, I was completely exposed and she could not penetrate my defenses. Damrada shrugged. If Kondo said so, he must have been right. There was no point arguing. All he had were mixed feelings over the fate of Misha, one of his friends. He kneeled next to her and held his left hand toward the wound. A soft light closed it. He pushed Misha's protruding eyeball back into its socket and pulled both eyelids down. Finally, he wiped her face clean, trying his best to restore at least some of her beauty. He could not bring the dead back to life, but he wanted her to rest in peace. Kondo asked, Why waste your time? Leave her, and the body will be disposed of before sunrise. Just answer my questions, please. Damrada replied, I cannot put my emotions aside the way you can. Kondo said, You are too soft. Damrada shot back, You are just crazy. How can you act so thoroughly emotionless at such a young age? Kondo replied, I do not have any emotions. End of story. Damrada said, That is ridiculous. I have seen hell in my time, Kondo said. It was Emperor Ludora who saved me from that hell. If you are switching sides on me, you will not receive any mercy. Damrada answered, I am ever His Majesty's faithful servant. I could never betray him. Kondo said, We will see about that. Remember, you are under my spell at the moment. If you want me to trust you, prove it by your actions. Then Kondo walked away without looking back. Damrada took one final glance at Misha and left the scene himself. Nights lasted a long time in the Imperial Capital. There was still work left to be done. Not long after, agents from the Intelligence Bureau disposed of Misha's body, leaving not a trace behind. The darkness of the capital's nights was so deep it could bury even these events, as if they had never happened at all. Upon receiving Yuuki's instructions, Kagali immediately went on the move. If they were going to carry out this coup, careful preparation was essential. Messengers were instantly dispatched, and within a few days, all the major players from around the world had gathered in one place. Nearly 30 of them were now at Yuuki's mansion in the Imperial Capital, faithful agents who all swore absolute loyalty to him. Some, like Vega, were embedded in other Imperial Corps and could not participate. The people here made up around half of Yuuki's executive staff. The coup itself had been in the works for some time, and the attendees were eagerly awaiting Yuuki's speech, feeling that the time was near. They were all capable people, climbing the ranks through their own strengths and making names for themselves in the military. Their loyalty to Emperor Ludora had never existed in the first place. Some were even excited at the thought of engineering an empire-wide revolution. There were visitors from other worlds, halflings with strange and unusual skills, superhumans subjected to cruel body enhancement experiments, and first-rate adventurers raised by Yuuki himself. There were enslaved warriors collected by Damrada, as well as magic born under Misha's protection. What they were faithful to most was violence. That was exactly where the composite division shone. A large meeting room was open to them, located upstairs above the grand atrium floor. Yuuki came in with Kagali just as everyone took their seats.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you all here.
He was all smiles, speaking in his usual cheerful tone as he greeted them.
Tomorrow I have a meeting planned with the Demon Lord Rimuru. I am having Misha bring over Damrada as well, so we will discuss more details once he arrives.
This instantly caused an uproar. One person asked if they were not supposed to be staging the coup by themselves. Another objected that the Demon Lord was too cunning and unpredictable to trust. A third pointed out that they were at war right now, so Rimuru could not simply slip out of that and slink over here. Yuuki's smile only broadened.
The Imperial army has been annihilated, you know. Rimuru killed all 940,000 troops who invaded the forest.
The room exploded again. Some called it insane. Others struggled with the travel times, calculating that only a few days had passed since the armies engaged. It was far too much for the audience to believe. Yuuki quieted them down with a laugh.
If we are going to overthrow the Empire, we need fighting power. That is why I have decided to join forces with Rimuru.
The audience began to understand Yuuki's words, even if they did not all agree with them. The more intelligent among them shifted their attention to whether the information was reliable. One Cerberus member asked if the information was what Lady Misha had brought back.
You got it. If we had not allied with them beforehand, I think they would have killed Misha long ago.
That made them react to Misha's role with surprise and respect. She may have done mostly undercover work, but she was also a well-known figure and an appropriate leader for Cerberus. Everyone in the room had attained their positions through their own efforts, so they knew how to assess their peers fairly. Oddly enough, they had a lot of trust in Yuuki that way. They knew he would never value someone inferior in ability. One of them accepted it with a grudging tone. In that case, I welcome this alliance. I am not too happy about how you kept this to yourself until now, but I am sure you had your reasons, eh, boss?
Not really any major reason, but yes. It is just that I lost to Guy and he made me promise him something.
Now the audience was in an uproar for another reason. Guy Crimson? The Lord of Darkness? Yuuki had fought him? People called it out of line, impossible, and amazing that he had even survived. Yuuki quieted them again.
I am sure you all have your opinions, but I do not have time to explain everything. For now, you are all going to have to accept it, and I hope you will be patient with me on this. Instead, I would like to discuss the arrangements for tomorrow's meeting and how we will conduct our operations afterward.
The only official forces remaining in the capital were the IIB and a force of new recruits. The top-ranking IIB personnel were a threat perhaps, but their rank-and-filers did not really count as a military force. The new recruits formed a vast army numbering a good 100,000, but they had no real skill. They were fill-ins, not even worth considering in this coup attempt. There were also around 20,000 guards serving as police, but in terms of equipment, they were no match for a military. The difference in gear was so vast that it would be like a grown-up facing a 5-year-old. At best, they could stop the coup for a short time. But the most powerful forces of all, the Imperial Guardians, were still at the Emperor's disposal. Yuuki explained that the IIB had Guardians mingled among them too. Technically speaking, the Guardians were the only ones they needed to worry about. Someone with ranking duel experience agreed that the top ranks packed a serious punch. Another person mocked him for patting himself on the back and wondered whether there might be traitors among the Guardians as well. Then a small, arrogant man said the only thing he had faith in was power, and he was not about to swear allegiance to some emperor who swaggered around like a fancy lad all the time. Scattered laughter broke out. They had allies among the Guardians. Reaffirming that fact just then made everyone realize how much of an advantage they had. The joke had been told by Arius, a somewhat small man known for his arrogance. He was an otherworlder, not summoned, but a visitor who had made the journey by chance. Mai Furuki, a black-haired girl who had been a high school student in Japan before she was summoned and picked up by Yuuki back when he led the Free Guild, asked whether Rimuru's forces would be ready by tomorrow. Thanks to Yuuki's support, Mai held deep, admiring trust for him. Then Tornawat, a large, muscular former slave fighter, chimed in. If Damrada had not noticed him, he might have spent his whole life toiling in the mines until he collapsed. After being thrown into the army, Tornawat received an education, something he took intense pride in. Despite his bulky build, he was intelligent enough to be appointed a staff officer in the composite division. Tornawat wondered whether Rimuru's army would need time unless they flew over, then asked whether they might really fly into the capital. Aliyah answered that flight magic consumed spiritual force. It might not be a problem for a demon lord, but she did not know whether all his rank-and-file monsters could fly. Aliyah was a petite magic caster who also wore the heavy armor of a fighter. She was nowhere near as young as she looked. In fact, she was an apprentice of Ghidora's and had undergone body enhancement surgery, making her unique in this crew. Tornawat corrected her. That was not what he meant. Whether the Empire's main force was away or not, the capital had a surveillance network covering the skies. If a large army came in from the air, they would be noticed no matter how far away they landed. Aliyah's face reddened a little. It was a surprisingly accurate observation, and being shown up like this was embarrassing. By magic caster standards, she was unusually short-tempered and too quick to speak without thinking things through. Yuuki interceded, guiding the chatter back to the main topic.
It is important to keep an exchange of ideas going here. Analyzing things from different angles could help us see things differently, after all.
Then he returned to Rimuru's arrival.
Rimuru has contacted me through Old Man Ghidorah to say that only a small number of them will be coming tomorrow.
The contact came through a Ghidorah-engineered anonymous magical call. Even if the IIB was listening, it was encrypted and impossible to decipher. Ghidorah had outlined the main points to Yuuki, and according to him, the roster they would send tomorrow was still undecided. Rimuru was definitely coming. But who would escort him? Yuuki reasoned that Rimuru had decided a show of force would not work on Ludora either. Quality over quantity. He expected Rimuru to bring only top brass, maybe about 10 people at most. Orca, a slender beauty who looked a little airheaded at first but was actually an extraordinary warrior with several hidden skills, wondered aloud whether Rimuru's side was underestimating the Empire or making fools of its allies. Tornawat stepped up to explain again. He told Orca both guesses were wrong. It took time to ready a large army, and delays could appear in many different ways. Rimuru had probably decided it was better to work with a small team of elites. Yuuki smiled, glad to be spared the trouble.
Exactly. That is why we need to work out our own direction now.
If Rimuru was bringing only his best fighters, that raised the question of who would match up against whom.
I am going to ask Rimuru what he thinks at the meeting tomorrow, so we need to put our thoughts together. For example, what are we going to do with Emperor Ludora?
It might have been arrogant of Yuuki to say that. Defeat was not even on his mind. Only victory was in his future. Discussing their treatment of the Emperor before the coup had even succeeded was a little abnormal. But no one pointed this out. Even Tornawat, always ready with a verbal jab, grinned and waited for Yuuki to continue. Yuuki explained that the Dwarven Kingdom knew about their activities too, so the deployed Composite Division forces were free to head for the capital without worrying about their rear. If all they had to deal with were the Imperial forces still left in the capital, it would be easy. Someone summed it up. The Guardians were the only threat.
That is right.
Yuuki was still smiling. He knew the true threat was elsewhere, an unknown entity known simply as the Marshal. And if he thought about why Guy had let him live in the first place, another question formed in his mind. Why had Rimuru taken action this time? Rimuru was a pacifist at heart. Yuuki had figured he would hate attacking other countries out of nowhere. Perhaps Rimuru simply did not want to have any regrets. But Yuuki felt that could not be the only reason. As he put the pieces together, he saw a hint of Guy's shadow behind Rimuru as well. If that was the case, perhaps there was a monster in the Empire worthy of even Guy's attention. Arius pushed the room's excitement forward. Depending on how things worked out, he said, they might have to kill the Emperor. Others immediately snapped back at him. Not so fast. Do not reserve the right for yourself. The crowd was now excited enough to openly discuss the Emperor's murder before the coup had even started. Yuuki agreed that it was too early to discuss Ludora's treatment, but he was glad to see everyone so revved up in advance. In fact, they would be discussing Ludora's fate at the meeting tomorrow. Ghidorah opposed killing him, and Damrada's loyalty was still squarely aimed at the Emperor. They were both important collaborators, and Yuuki hated the idea of clashing with them. On top of that, there was a healthy chance that the monster Guy was wary of was Ludora himself. If so, it would be suicidal for Yuuki to make careless moves. Yuuki concluded that they should wait and see how it turned out. There was no need to put himself in the hot seat for no good reason. He could always have Rimuru take the Emperor too. They would save the strategic details for after Damrada arrived, but Yuuki already had a draft outline ready for approval. First, the main part of the composite division would overrun and capture the capital. Any Imperial Guardians who got in the way would be handled by the people in this room. Yuuki expected big things from them. They were no less capable than the Guardians themselves. Maybe they could not take the top-ranked ones alone, but they had numerical advantage. If multiple allies swarmed one target, that should make up the difference. The big names like Ludora and the Marshal could be left to Rimuru, considering he was kind enough to join their fight at all. That was probably what Rimuru was aiming to do anyway, so Yuuki was sure the Demon Lord would accept it. Meanwhile, no Imperial reinforcements would come from anywhere to defend the capital. Out of their 3 major armies, the Armored Division had been destroyed by Rimuru. The rest of the Composite Division would join Yuuki once the trend was clear. The Magical Beast Division was far away in the clouds over distant lands. Even if they found out and rushed over at full speed, it would all be over by then. Now that the plan had progressed this far, victory looked almost certain. Yuuki was not about to hurry matters, but he was sure it was imminent. Still, he could not shake the uneasy feeling that he was missing something. What could it be? A calm voice boomed across the heated meeting hall. "Pardon my lateness." The moment it did, everyone shrank back as if showered with ice-cold water. Yuuki looked toward the entrance.
There you are, Damrada.
He was finally here. Today, Damrada was dressed in his military uniform, a rarity considering his usual merchant disguise. That was when Yuuki began to worry.
Where is Misha?
Damrada answered, "She is dead." The hall fell silent. Everyone went on guard, sensing something disturbing. They had all been in many life-threatening situations, so they were sensitive to the signs.
What do you mean, Damrada?
Damrada said, "I mean exactly what I said. She was killed by Kondo a moment ago." The instant Yuuki heard the news, the lingering uneasiness in his chest exploded. That uneasy feeling that he had overlooked something, now he knew what it was. He and Damrada had not known each other for long, but their relationship ran deep. They had shared countless evil machinations that could never be revealed to the public. It was Damrada's assistance that helped Yuuki take down the Echidna Club, once the overlords of organized crime. Then they established Cerberus together, with Damrada working tirelessly to build it up. That was what Yuuki had thought. But maybe he had it all wrong. In fact, everything was going exactly how the Empire wanted. Cerberus was built from a core group that Damrada recruited for a purpose. Its mission was to weed out the talented from the incompetent, and its network spread around the world to find and bring in new potential talent. Protecting lost otherworlders was part of that, and they had not started this recently. It had been going on for a while, even back when the Echidna Club was dominant. In a way, did that not mean Yuuki himself had been discovered by Damrada in the same manner? Damrada was in the business of scouting strong prospects and bringing them under his wing. While he was doing that, he discovered Yuuki. If Damrada himself emerged from his undercover position, he would be too conspicuous. Yuuki had been selected as a charismatic public figure. Yuuki thought he was using Damrada, but it was the other way around. Yet that did not mean Damrada had double-crossed him. His loyalty was genuine. Perhaps someone had manipulated Damrada in order to make the ever-suspicious Yuuki trust him. Thinking about it that way seemed to answer every question Yuuki had up to now. Picking up on all of this, Yuuki let out an exhausted sigh.
Well, you sure put one over on me, so when did this all begin?
Damrada sounded indifferent. What do you mean? He used the same tone as always. But now Yuuki was positive that something was off. Damrada did not seem to be playing dumb. He honestly did not understand the question. In other words, the man himself did not even realize he was being manipulated. No wonder, Yuuki thought. If he did not realize it was happening, he would not know to watch for it. Yuuki recalled their last meeting. Damrada had insisted he had not betrayed anyone, and Yuuki felt that was the truth. Maybe something had been done to him after that. If Yuuki could trust his own instincts, Damrada's manipulation had happened only recently. Yuuki settled himself. He had decided to trust Damrada, and he was not going to complain about that now. The important question was what whoever sent Damrada here wanted from them. Someone was controlling him. Yuuki was certain of that much now, and based on it, he surmised that they were in a very delicate situation. For all he knew, the mansion could be fully surrounded in the time it took to deal with Damrada. Yuuki was lost in thought. Kagali quietly analyzed the situation herself, but the already fired-up audience was enraged by Damrada's behavior. Alia denounced him for disrespecting Sir Yuuki. Tornawat asked what Damrada was thinking and whether he had come to betray them all. Damrada replied aloofly, "Betray? What a strange thing to accuse me of. From beginning to end, my allegiance to His Majesty Emperor Ludora has been unwavering." Arius spat back that this was exactly what betraying them meant. Damrada was notorious for being corrupted by money, a fact some of his companions looked down on him for. Some even openly talked behind his back about how he would surely betray them all for the right price. That was why the group here was more angered than surprised by this revelation. Tornawat was the first among them to act. He lifted Damrada by the shirt and shouted at him. He demanded to know why Damrada, the man who had found him and told him to live for the greater good instead of dying in the mines, would do this. But Tornawat was actually trying to protect Damrada. Before anyone else could act, he wanted to confront his benefactor himself and figure out what was going on. To Damrada, this was probably unwelcome attention. With a gentle squeeze of Tornawat's wrist, he flicked his hand back, manipulating Tornawat's muscle tension to reverse the hold. Damrada asked, "Tornawat, do you remember what I said to you?" His eyes were so cold that they chilled the normally level-headed Tornawat to the core. Tornawat grabbed his wrist and barely managed to answer. Damrada continued, "I told you to be strong for the greater good, did I not? And this power is all you have to show for it?" All of Damrada's force converged on a single point. Tornawat's wrist creaked, then shattered in an instant. Tornawat groaned, asking what Damrada had done to his wrist. Then he backed away, rubbing it as he used one of the healing potions he always kept on hand. Damrada stood at ease and refrained from a second attack, but there was nothing off guard about him. In a world where some monsters could repair broken bones in an instant, you could never let up until you were sure your opponent had been neutralized. Failing to realize that could be lethal. Yuuki narrowed his eyes at Damrada. He knew this man was powerful. No one ranked that high among the single digits without being able to outclass a room full of champions like these. The question was whether Damrada possessed an ultimate skill, and if so, how good he was at using it. Yuuki wondered whether his anti-skill would work on it. Depending on the answer, he might have to kill Damrada. He needed to know, so he did not dare stop anyone from confronting him. Arius shouted that Damrada was the Emperor's dog. He had thought Damrada was just a money-grubbing bastard, but Damrada had tricked them all. Why would a coward walk in alone and expose himself like this? Then things began to unfold. Tornawat spoke next. He owed Damrada a great debt, so he would make Damrada's death painless. Now Tornawat was ready to challenge him with everything he had. Damrada replied, "Too late." Tornawat grabbed the battle mace hanging from his belt and heaved it up with both hands, but Damrada had no problem ducking the strike. In a clean, natural movement, Damrada dove toward Tornawat's chest and gently pushed out the palm of his right hand. The move looked light and airy, but it hit its target with a deep, heavy impact. This was Spiral Penetrator. a type of Fajin martial arts move that strikes its opponent with focused, explosive force. Fighting Spirit is given directional kinetic energy that penetrates both armor and muscle, destroying the target from the inside out. Its power is proportional to the amount of fighting spirit infused into it. If Damrada was the one focusing it, the move could carry the lethal force of a tank round. Tornawat crouched down, coughing up blood, his legs too weak to stand. How could he? That single blow had just destroyed all of his internal organs. Tornawat gasped that Damrada had been that strong all along. Damrada answered with contempt. Well, well, judging a book by its cover? The classic move of a conceited pile of muscle supported by a massive ego. Were you laboring under the assumption that you outgunned me just because I hired you as a guard? Tornawat could only groan. Damrada said, I asked you to be strong. Humans are no fools. They do not need to rely on arcane esoteric abilities. They can become as strong as they want if they train hard enough, just like I did. Then Damrada shot his leg backward, executing a roundhouse kick without looking behind him. The attacker, aiming for his blind spot, unable to react in time, promptly died of a broken neck. Damrada made it look like stepping on an ant. But this was Arius, a man whose strength even Yuuki praised. He possessed the unique skill Murderer, coupled with the twin skills Silent Movement and Conceal Presence, the perfect combination for assassination missions. That made him a natural killer, one good enough to rank number 44 in the Imperial hierarchy. But despite Arius' specialty in anti-personnel operations, Damrada wasted no time dispatching him. Damrada continued, As I think I have just shown, leaning on your abilities is not good enough. When push comes to shove, the thing you can rely on most is your well-trained body and mind. If you ask me, all of you here are useless. He was choosing harsh words. The people in the room had never been ridiculed like this by even their martial arts instructors, and they were indignant as they heard him. It was as if he was trying to teach the weak a lesson, and it infuriated them. They all glowered at Damrada, eyes blazing with murderous intent. In the middle of all this, Yuuki was still calmly, silently observing. Now he had his conclusion. Yuuki knew it. Damrada had not betrayed them. Someone was controlling him. Maybe someone on the Emperor's side, considering Arius' position in the Imperial Guardians. Damrada had not killed Tornawat, but against Arius he showed no mercy. That was all the proof Yuuki needed. Damrada still had his free will, but he could not do anything inconvenient for whoever ruled over him. Whatever controlled Damrada must have been a powerful force indeed. Even so, Damrada was still trying to find a way to communicate his current situation to Yuuki. Based on that, Yuuki worked out the best solution.
Okay guys, eyes over here. Switch to a retreat operation right now. I am leaving all authority to Kagali, so all of you drop everything and regroup with the composite division.
Aaliyah protested that they did not have to run away. They could take care of the traitor and rise to action right now.
No.
Yuuki immediately rejected the suggestion. He still wore his usual carefree smile, but his eyes were not jovial as he scanned the room.
Damrada is stalling for time. That is why he is going on and on like this. It is what he has been allowed to do, okay?
Kagali caught the phrasing and asked what he meant by allowed. Yuuki nodded.
Right. Damrada did not double-cross us. Someone is controlling his mind, and that someone is trying to wipe us out right here.
This revelation was met with mixed reactions, but it did help his comrades regain their judgment. Holding back the desire to kill Damrada, they focused their gazes on Kagali, the second in command. Kagali had reached the same conclusion as Yuuki. She knew they were in a critical situation. The alarm bells in her mind told her so. Now that Yuuki had given his instructions, she knew what she had to do. Things were urgent, and there was no time to argue. Kagali ordered, "We will abandon this place and head for the Composite Division's encampment." Aaliyah asked about Sir Yuuki.
Do not worry about me. I doubt Damrada would let me leave anyway, so I am going to have to deal with him here. You guys get going.
Yuuki turned his back to the crowd so he could face Damrada. Kagali ordered the group out. Everyone answered together, "Roger." Everyone realized what they had to do. Whether Damrada had betrayed them or not did not matter now. Once they saw Yuuki turn around, they knew he was ready for anything. The time for debate was over. Right now, as all the superpowers in the room knew, job one was simply to survive. Alia carried the fallen Tornawat. The sight of a dainty little girl picking up a muscle-bound giant could have been funny, but no one was laughing. A healer cast magic on Tornawat as they joined the line of fleeing rebels. Then, in perfectly orderly fashion, they all blended into the darkness of the night. A few minutes later, Yuuki and Damrada were the only ones left in the vast meeting hall.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.